begin just by sharing a couple of stories about Swamiji, just to give you a little context. I was his assistant in the early 80s, again in the 90s, and altogether about 23 years. Swamiji was my direct employer, my direct boss, and I had a very wonderful role with him because I was an assistant and part secretary. Occasionally I would be his cook if his regular cook wasn't feeling well. I would be called in, and a little bit of housekeeping. Sometimes he would have so many projects going and so many stacks of correspondence and just letters and books and all sorts of things all over his apartment. Sometimes he would say, "Would you just help me clean this up?" And so it was wonderful to just have that kind of relationship where we did all kinds of things. And one day, it was very demanding work though. I remember we were doing a photo shoot for one of his books or albums. I don't really remember the project so much anymore, but we had been going all week for 12, 14-hour days for a long stretch of time. And I was really looking forward to Saturday, being able to sleep in and catch my breath a little bit. And I hadn't been feeling quite perfectly well either. And so Friday night wrapped up, I went home. I was just luxuriating in this thought of Saturday. Oh, what a blessing. And at 8 a.m., the phone rang. It might have even been a little earlier than that. And I answered the phone, and Swami's voice said, "Where are you?" We were mid-project, so it was like, "You're not going to let me down now, are you?" And I just said, "I'm running a little late. I'm on my way." And I dashed over, and we started in again. And I realized from that, and it's a lesson that I've always carried with me, that you have to keep going. You have to push through those limitations of the body and the mind that just are resistance to a flow of energy. And Swami would often say that when he was in a particular flow of energy, he really couldn't break it because it would form this inertia and you couldn't get back to it. And so it was very important to muster that will and be able to push through the resistance. He would tell the story of when he was using a staple gun trying to get one of his first structures up at Ananda, and it was so difficult to squeeze this thing and get this staple gun to work. But after he used his willpower and just kept going, then it got easier and easier. And so that lesson was very important. To balance that lesson, though, I remember one time I was working in the photo studio, which was in the lower level of his house. And I, worked there all hours of day and night because that's how he worked. He just kept very interesting hours, and we'd push through many projects. But this one night, it was after midnight. I was working on a project by myself in the photo studio, and he came in and said, "You need to get some rest." And I said, "Well, Swami, I'm modeling myself after you, You're not asleep, and I'm still working too." And he just very kindly and firmly said, "You have to remember, you are not me." And so he insisted that I go home and get some rest. So would you like to tell a story? I'll tell more too. Oh, okay.
So I will speak from the ether here until Nirmala will move the camera over here in just a sec. I'll share a couple of stories that relate to life with Swamiji, and of these is an experience that we had with him in Italy, and this is something that I've occasionally told before, but it just showed his insight and his ability to just stay in the moment, even when things are sort of not going the way he might have wished that they would. And so what happened was we were driving, I actually was driving his car with him in the passenger seat, and I believe the other passengers were Nirmala and Kirtani in the back seat of the car. And so we were driving through the countryside in Italy towards Assisi from Perugia. We had been in the Perugia area for some errands in the late afternoon or early evening, and it was driving rain, just a monsoon-style rain in Italy. And as I was driving down the highway, this is Italy, so you can drive at a fairly good rate of speed. It was probably, I would suppose, on the order of 90 or 100 kilometers an hour, something like that. The windshield wiper right in front of me as the driver flew off, just sailed right off the back of the car and was gone, just lost forever, just broke right off in the moment. So I pulled off to the side of the road. I stepped out of the car. I got, his windshield wiper on his side and moved it over to my side successfully in the rain, of course getting very wet doing it. But at least I now had a functioning windshield wiper in front of me, which was important to be able to safely drive the car. So Swami said, "Well, I know where the dealer is. He's not far from here. He's on our way. So why don't we pull over there and see if we can get a new one?" So we did that. And it was closing time. And I'm guessing it was like 7 o'clock in the evening. And this owner who was there was the last one there. He was closing up, and he was clearly a man who was ready to get home, to be dry and to have some good dinner. And he was not interested in a long conversation. He was friendly, but he was matter of fact that it was time for him to go home. And Swamiji explained our situation. We just needed one windshield wiper, and it so happened that there was a brand new car similar to his, which was now several years old, sitting there, and could we just use that one because it's the same windshield wiper? Oh, no. The man didn't want to, disturb a brand new car, et cetera, et cetera. Come back tomorrow. Well, for Swamiji, tomorrow was not convenient. Swami was giving a class tomorrow, and, et cetera. I mean, there were complications to it. And the man was making excuses. And I realized in that moment, Swamiji just turned and he walked towards one side of the room and he started pointing at some brochures there. And Dharmadas, what do you think of this? And he pulled out one of the brochures and he said, look at this van. I've been telling Anand we should get one of these vans. And he just started a different train of thought. He could have said, look, I bought my car from you and, you should help me and et cetera. I mean, he could have just gone in that direction. No, he just went in this other direction. And you could just see the lights went on in the man's awareness. And he said, well, why don't you take the windshield wiper and you can pay me later. And sure enough, Ananda, Italy did end up getting that van some years later. But it was a fascinating example to me of staying centered in the moment, understanding the psychology of this fellow, that he would be motivated to help if he felt like there was more business in the future involved in it. And it was just a sweet reminder of how Swamiji could work with people at their level and yet do so in an uplifting way, an uplifting way.